Johnny Mathis, now 90, resides alone in the same Hollywood Hills home that has been ravaged by fires and landslides. His memory is slipping away. He can hardly recall songs that once made him a star. It's not merely a case of old age, however. There's more to the tale than that. There's a sordid backstory to his reclusiveness. Secret vices, cryptic injections by celebrity physicians, and an agonizing decision he made in 1956 that persists to this day. The actual reason Johnny Mathis' later life is so tragic isn't what you'd suppose. Nobody had any idea that the day September 30th, 1935, Johnny Mathis was born in a small town called Gilmer, Texas. He would someday be a music legend. Clem and Mildred Mathis did the best they could with what they had. Clem was a chauffeur and handyman. Mildred worked as a house cleaner for rich white families. But Clem had an old life. He used to play piano and sing on vaudeville stages in Texas. He had aspirations, but racism closed the door on all of that. That hurt never went away. So when little Johnny, just 3 years old, started humming My Blue Heaven, Clem saw a second chance. He began teaching his son songs from his own forgotten past, hoping music could be the key to something bigger. By the time Johnny was 5 in 1940, the family had packed up and left segregated Texas behind. They joined the Great Migration and moved to San Francisco's Fillmore district. The new apartment wasn't much. All 7 kids shared one small room in a basement unit on Post Street. But outside those walls, the streets were alive with jazz and soul. The Fillmore was called the Harlem of the West. It had music pouring out of clubs day and night. Johnny soaked it all in. He chopped wood with his father to heat their tiny place. His parents were still working for wealthy white households, just making ends meet, but the atmosphere was charged with rhythm. Then something miraculous occurred in 1943, when Johnny was only 8. Clem somehow accumulated $25, which would equate to about $447 today. That $25 purchased a used upright piano, but it was too large to get through the front door. So Clem dismantled it piece by piece, took it in, and reassembled it right in their living room. Johnny sat there mouth agape the whole night. That piano was his universe. He played nonstop way past his parents' return home, exhausted from work. Their living room became a stage, and that old piano the beginning of a career that would top the music charts. Johnny was more than a musician, though. He could fly. Johnny attended George Washington High School. Despite being just 5 feet 7 inches, he could jump 6 feet 5 inches and 1/2 in the high jump. That record remains. His greatest opponent was none other than Bill Russell, who would go on to become an NBA legend. They were buddies. They traveled together. By 1954, newspapers were comparing them side by side, and they were ranked the city's best. Johnny ranked second. But the same year, his leap was 2 inches short of the 1952 Olympic standard, and 3 inches shy of making the 1956 Olympic team. When the offer to audition for the Olympics arrived, it seemed like destiny. And something else arrived that week, as well. A telegram from Columbia Records offering him the opportunity to record in New York. He had to make a decision: pursue gold at the Olympics or pursue the music in his soul. It wasn't a simple decision, particularly since the world around him was brutal. As a kid growing up in Texas, Johnny had witnessed firsthand the ugly face of racism. Whites-only signs being denied admission, being treated as though he didn't belong. And it didn't abate just because he was famous. In the 1950s on the road, he was informed that someone would shoot him if he ever walked onto the stage of a show in the South. He didn't cancel. Rather, he sang chances are moving constantly around the stage, so he would not be an easy target. He risked everything to sing. That's the other part of his story people don't always hear. The quiet courage it took just to stand in the light. In 1954, before the record contract, Johnny was invited to a Sunday jam session at the Black Hawk Jazz Club in San Francisco. It was a smoky dive where all the greats, including Miles Davis and Dave Brubeck, would play. Johnny was just 19, but the instant he began to sing, Helen Noga, who owned the club with her husband, brought everything to a halt. She recognized what she had heard. She took him on as her client that day. She refused to accept no. And she didn't just stop there. She contacted Columbia Records and persuaded a producer with a big name, George Avishan, to visit him and listen to him play. That was in September 1955. When Johnny had just finished his second song, Ian was already composing the telegram that would transform Johnny's life. He regarded him as phenomenal. Johnny went to New York for his initial recording session in March of 1956, but still maintained his aspiration of becoming a teacher. He was learning to be an English and PE teacher at San Francisco State College. He even was elected student body president. But school had to take the back burner after the Columbia deal. It pained to leave, but the music was calling louder. That same year, Olympic tryouts passed and went. Johnny remained in New York and recorded instead. He could never help but wonder what would have happened had he jumped one last time. But he also knew that he made the right decision. His voice was different. It had been influenced by 6 years of intensive study with Bay Area vocal coach Connie Cox, who had taken him in when he was 13. Johnny couldn't pay for lessons, so he worked around her house to earn them. She taught him classical technique, breath control, range. She provided him with the materials that put his voice through low, deep notes to nearly unattainably high ones without losing tone. That instruction made him a once-in-a-generation vocalist. During November 1956, Wonderful, Wonderful, his first single, entered the charts. It rose, fell, and rose again, remaining on the Billboard Top 100 for 39 weeks and reaching number 14. But it was his subsequent single, It's Not For Me to Say, in February 1957, which broke the top 5. He even performed the piano on the movie Lizzie when the song was used. Everything was occurring simultaneously. Columbia took out full-page ads to boast. That Wonderful, Wonderful had become a sustained success 5 months after it came out. Then came a record that shocked the business. In 1958, Johnny's Greatest Hits album reached number 1. It was on the Billboard charts for 490 consecutive weeks, close to 10 years. No album had ever achieved that before, not Elvis, not Sinatra, not anyone. It went on to sell more than 3 million copies. It was the initial Greatest Hits album to demonstrate to the world how strong that formula could be. The music business never let it be forgotten. Yet the journey wasn't easy. Touring large halls like the Copacabana and Las Vegas clubs in 1958, Johnny learned who was actually in charge: organized crime. The underworld dominated most of the nightlife. And although he was the headline for the evening, Johnny couldn't stay at the hotels that had him perform. He had to stay over in the black areas of town. One club owner bluntly said to him, "Oh no, you gotta stay over in the colored section." His parents just said, "So what?" They said, "You're here for the music." But the racism continued to get worse. In the South, the death threats did not cease. One evening, someone threatened that if he got on stage, they'd kill him. So he did what he did do. He went out and sang anyway, never stopping moving. It was frightening. Sometimes he couldn't even book a hotel. He slept in his automobile. That sort of fear leaves an imprint. But Johnny did not let it alter him. He allowed the music to say it. In 1959, Johnny released Heavenly. The album was rich with orchestral elegance, and 500,000 copies were sold quickly. It reached number 1 for 5 weeks. It was on the charts for 295 weeks. It was the 5th best-selling album of 1959 and 7th of the decade. In the United Kingdom, it was titled Ride on a Rainbow and reached number 10. It was platinum in 1986 with over 1 million copies sold. On a chilly December evening in 1958, an unusual incident took place. As rock and roll was bursting all over America, a gentle-voiced singer, Johnny Mathis, released an album of Christmas music on his own in complete silence. Nobody thought anything special would be done by it, but towards the end of that winter season, the album reached number 3 on the Billboard 200. It remained there year after year. In 1999, it had sold 5 million copies. Folks weren't merely listening to it, they were playing it every holiday season, as if it was part of the ritual. Percy Faith arrangements of Winter Wonderland didn't merely sound pretty. They felt like snow gently falling within your living room. That record was so strong that in 1963 they came out with a follow-up, Sounds of Christmas. It reached number 2 on the new holiday albums chart and came back every year for 5 years in a row. While the Beatles were dismantling the music scene, Johnny Mathis was quietly constructing an empire of sleigh bells and string section. Then there was a January evening in 1964, 2 months before the Beatles rocked America on Ed Sullivan. Johnny Mathis took to the stage of the Hollywood Palace. It was show 3, with host Hugh O'Brien, featuring guests such as Ginger Rogers and Marty Angel. Mathis performed before millions. It was not a wild shot, it was a last stand for the Cuners. And it succeeded. ABC's variety show was now competing with CBS's Ed Sullivan Show, and Mathis was asked back repeatedly. It showed his voice remained potent on national television, despite the rise of rock bands. Mathis was in trouble by 1967 and needed to adapt or disappear. Columbia Records wanted him to update, so he took a gamble. He came back to Mercury Records and put out Up and Away on the 23rd of October. It was different. It had folk rock, it had pop. He did Dr. Dolittle covers and performed Tim Hardin's Misty Roses. Critics were caught off guard. Billboard liked it. The album lingered on the charts for 20 weeks and even made it to number 19 on the R&B chart. It showed Mathis was able to change without losing his soul. But then came something he never planned. In 1982, during what he believed was a private conversation, Mathis told a U.S. Weekly reporter, "Homosexuality is a way of life that I've grown accustomed to." He thought it was off the record. It wasn't. The moment the words hit the magazine, his world changed. Death threats flooded in, especially from conservative states. Concerts became dangerous. He had to stop announcing his shows publicly. In a 2006 interview, he said, "I'd had enough exposure and was concerned about what came with it." That single sentence in 1982 nearly ended everything. Back in 1969, he made a bold musical move. On July 30th, he released Love Theme from Romeo and Juliet. It blended pop with classical film scores. The title song sold more than 1 million copies, remained on Billboard's easy listening chart for 13 weeks, and even cracked the Hot 100. The album remained on the LP chart for 24 weeks and reached number 52. He was combining genres before most musicians even had the courage. It inspired other musicians in the 1970s to do the same. Then, in 1978, something truly remarkable occurred. Mathis collaborated with Denise Williams on a record entitled Too Much, Too Little, Too Late. It was his first hit at number 1 since 1957, a 21-year hiatus. The record crested the Hot 100, the Adult Contemporary chart, the R&B chart, and even Record World Singles chart. His previous top 10 single had come in 1963. 15 years later, he was again in the saddle. It went gold in the US and silver in the UK. That duet didn't just revive his career. It launched a whole new phase of duets with Jane Oliver, Natalie Cole, Dionne Warwick, and Gladys Knight. In May 1973, he took another creative risk. Over just 3 days at Sigma Sound Studios, he recorded I'm Coming Home with Tom Bell. It wasn't just music, it was a message. The title song spoke of renouncing pseudo-existences and embracing real ones. Drums and bass replicated trains. Strings drifted like scenery. The album peaked only at number 115 on the charts, but its impact was colossal. Tom Bell received the first ever Producer of the Year Grammy at the 17th Annual Grammy Awards. Songs from that album were even covered by the Spinners and continued its soulful tradition.